Hello. I hope you guys enjoyed lunch. Now I'd like to begin with the afternoon portion of the conference. By popular demand, we are happy to bring back the NASA Leadership Roundtable. NASA centers provide different services and offer unique technical expertise to commercial companies. Some have innovation centers that host companies and act as incubators. How are these relationships working, and can we improve them? We invite the leaders of these centers to discuss their experiences and perspectives. The moderator of this panel is Dr. Rebecca Spike-Kaiser, who is currently NASA's Associate Deputy Administrator for Strategy and Policy, and she will introduce our distinguished guests. Please welcome Dr. Rebecca Spike-Kaiser.
Thank you all, and if you didn't see this panel last year, you're in for a treat. These folks are NASA leaders for a reason. And not only are they engaging and enthusiastic about what they do, but what you'll see is how well they work closely together, and that'll really come through. So let me say first off that we encourage you to tweet your questions, and please do. And I'm going to intersperse my questions to the panel with yours. So that's your job. Be engaged, ask lots and lots of questions, and if you don't have the tweeting capability, I will leave some time at the end for actual questions from human beings raising their hands the old-style way. So let me introduce our panelists. We have Bob Cabana. And Bob has been director of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida since October 2008. Prior to that, he was director of the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. And before Stennis, he served as deputy director of Johnson Space Center in Texas. Bob graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy with a BS in math and was an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. He has flown on 4 shuttle missions, serving as pilot of Discovery in October of 1990 and December of 1992, commander of Columbia in July of 94, and commander of Endeavour in December 98 on the first space station assembly mission. Next we have Ellen Ochoa. And Ellen is deputy director of Johnson Space Center, and she's been deputy since 2007. She became an astronaut in 1991 and is a veteran of 4 space flights as well. She was a mission specialist on STS-56 in 1993, payload commander on STS-66 in 94, and mission specialist and flight engineer on STS-96 in 1999 and STS-110 in 2002. She received a BS in physics from San Diego State University and an MS and a doctorate in electrical engineering from Stanford. And she's a classical flutist and a private pilot. And Ray Lugo. No, sorry, let me go to Pete. Pete's sitting there. Pete Warden. Pete is director of Ames right here in Mountain View, California. And he's transformed the Ames Research Center over his tour of 3 years. He's taken a leadership role in cost-effective small satellite missions. And prior to becoming Ames Center Director, Pete was a research professor of astronomy, optical sciences, and planetary sciences at the University of Arizona. Additionally, he previously served as a consultant to DARPA on space-related issues. In 2004, he served as Congressional Fellow and Chief Advisor to the Chairman of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Science and Space. He retired in 2004 after serving 29 years in the U.S. Air Force. And Ray. Ray Lugo is director of the Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. He's been director since 2010. And he served as deputy director from 2007 to 2010. Prior to his positions at Glenn, he served as Deputy Program Manager of the Launch Services Program at Kennedy Space Center. He began his NASA career in 1975 as a co-op, and his first assignment was as an engineer responsible for construction modifications to Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in preparation for the first shuttle launch. He earned a BS in engineering from the University of Central Florida and a master's in engineering management from Florida Institute of Technology. Now on to our questions. So, can we please start with Bob? And can you describe your center's current efforts to engage and support commercial companies?
Well, I think they're quite extensive, Rebecca. I mean, first off, we established a Center Planning and Development Office to be our interface, our front door to KSC for commercial ventures. With the transition from the shuttle, and I look back over on the last year how much we've accomplished, but we had a lot of excess capacity. And we truly want to make KSC this multi-user spaceport of the future. And so how could we utilize this capacity that we don't have to help enable commercial space? And I feel we have been given a mandate from the administration and from Charlie to enable commercial space operations. So how do we do that? And it's through partnerships and making available what we have at KSC to commercial companies. So a lot of it has been done through the state of Florida, Space Florida. I think one of our premier agreements from an optical point of view is that we took Orbiter Processing Facility 3 in the shuttle main engine shop, and through a use agreement with the state of Florida, we've turned it over to Space Florida, and they, in turn, are bringing Boeing and the CST-100 spacecraft in there, should Boeing continue to win on the Commercial Crew SpaceX. We've also worked another capability, the NSLD. It's a logistics rework facility that was off-site at KSC, and we've signed a Space Act agreement to allow a company to maintain over 1,600 pieces of NASA equipment and keep them available for us and the people that operate them. We don't have a need for it all right now, but we are going to have a need for it in the future. How do we maintain that, keep it up, and be able to utilize it when we do have this capability and this critical skill? And Craig Technologies is going to be operating the NSLD and keep that equipment available for us in the future. I think when I look at, what is a multi-user spaceport of the future, it's got horizontal launch and landing capability, vertical processing, and so on. And we're working on a number of agreements for companies to move in and operate from the shuttle landing facility. A lot of this is still, in the negotiation stage, and it depends on how things work out in the commercial industry. But the key here is that we want to make KSC that commercial spaceport of the future. We want science fiction to become reality, and I think we're making a huge step in that direction, and we've made tremendous progress over the last year, Rebecca.
Great. Ellen, how about you? What are you doing at Johnson Space Center?
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here today. We have a lot to talk about in terms of the work we do at Johnson Space Center with commercial companies. There's really two primary ways that we work with commercial companies. One of them is through the actual programs that NASA has set up. So initially starting with the COTS program, which was headquartered at JSC. And so the vast majority of the people that supported that and worked with those companies were JSC folks. And that extends all the way through the successful flight that we had earlier on SpaceX, where we had people working all through the mission as well in mission control, and really a masterful job by Holly Ridings in mission control to work with both the NASA and the SpaceX team to carry that out. We of course have the ISS program, and they are the customer for commercial cargo now, and we're starting up the commercial resupply services contract in a big way now. And of course, they're the eventual customer for Commercial Crew. And then in the latest program, the Commercial Crew program, hosted by KSC, JSC is a major partner of that, and so we have talented folks at both of our centers that support that and that work very closely on our partner integration teams with all of those folks. The other major way we work with companies is similar to what Bob was talking about, where individual companies come to us and say, you have some expertise at your center that we'd like to take advantage of, that we'd like to use. You have some kind of testing capability, analysis capability, and that fits in well with a need that we have that we don't need to necessarily grow in our company right now. And we'd like to take advantage of that. So we have separate Space Act agreements outside of the program to work with all of the companies that are involved in CC Dev, as well as a lot of other companies. Some of them are essentially kind of just an overall technical services for spacecraft systems because we have so much experience in developing and operating spacecraft systems. So we might be able to help out in advanced life support, GNNC, lots of different areas. We do some testing. We've done recently some thruster testing for Boeing on their CST-100 thrusters. We've done heat shield ablator testing. And even long before Commercial Crew, we've had a Space Act agreement with Bigelow Aerospace for a number of years. As you know, they licensed the inflatable technology from us, and we continue to work with them on that. We work with Scaled Composites to do testing now and analysis on their nitrous oxide. So there are a lot of things that we do at Johnson Space Center in which various different companies have an interest in.
Great. Ellen, let's get this question out of the way for you and Bob. Is human spaceflight dead?
Let's see. I know several people that are flying in space right now, so I certainly hope not.
Isn't NASA going out of business? Aren't we downsizing?
You know, we're all about moving exploration forward, and I think actually that's what everybody in this room is about. And at JSC, you know, we have the International Space Station program, and we're able to right now really focus on utilizing the station. But part of our job is making sure we can continue to utilize that. We have got to be able to get cargo and crew up and back. And the people in this room are prime players in that.
Thanks, Bob.
You know, I was up at Tallahassee talking to someone up there, and they said, geez, it's really a shame that the Kennedy Space Center is closing, and you know,
yeah. Somebody asked me that at the sushi
over.
bar
and I
last
said,
night.
They had to screw me out of the ceiling as I educated him.
Yeah.
But you know, first off, this whole thing, you know, NASA's exploration program, commercial space, big rockets, and commercial and all that stuff, they're not mutually exclusive. They're very compatible, and we need them both, and we need to work together. And I've been coming to the conference here for a couple of years now, and you know, I love getting out and talking and saying how important it is that we work together to make this a reality. Our space program, nothing could be further from the truth. We have been so busy at the Kennedy Space Center this last year. It was a year ago this month that we flew Atlantis on its last flight. And the next day, 2,200 people walked out the door, and that was difficult. But when I look at the progress we have made on the infrastructure, preparing for the future, and you know, the whole 21st century launch complex idea, you know, the money that we're spending on the heavy lift rocket, the modifications that we're making support commercial space also. We've been very proactive in how we design what we're doing so that it's not specific to any one vehicle. The 21st century launch complex line, you know, it's being used to support the heavy rocket, but it also is making modifications to the range and making it more efficient and helping in that regard too. So I think that we're working together extremely well in those areas, and you know, the clean pad concept, the ideas that we have in place to bring commercial companies and a large government exploration program working together from the same launch complex. I mean, this is the future. One day, my vision for KSC is that, you know, one day it's like going to a true spaceport. We got commercial crew and cargo taken off. We got government missions taken off. We got, you know, tourists going up on suborbital flights for a little jaunt into space to see the Earth from 50 miles high. And, you know, we're making that happen, and we've made huge progress.
Great. Pete, at Ames. Ames is renowned for its innovative approaches to programs and to acquisition. So can you talk about some of your current efforts to engage and support commercial companies?
Well, I'm proud to say that Ames has a 73-year history of having one of our primary, maybe even our primary functions, development of private sector, originally aeronautics when we were part of the National Advisory Committee on Aeronautics, and now both space and aeronautics. So we're very proud of that history. We're a technology center like Glenn, and these technologies are relevant for a wide range of efforts. Just to give you one of the key things is, I like to say that, you know, if you want to get into space, you go talk to Johnson or Marshall or Stennis or Kennedy. But if you want to come home, you have to come and talk to one of the research centers, because the entry, descent, and landing technology that all of them are using and improving is riding on material that's been developed at one of the research centers, mostly at Ames, but it's, you know, so I think it's really critical, and there are dozens of those technologies that we've transferred. But I think that there's a much broader job that the technology centers have in terms of starting new commercial endeavors. That the technologies we have huge potential to help life here on Earth. In fact, we have a new commercial emerging space office. The director here works for headquarters, Alex McDonald. I don't know if you're going to talk, but yeah, great. So well, then you can ignore him. But there's a huge range of programs that go. You know, they start with launch and access to space, but doing things in space, exploring the solar system, maybe getting resources from space, a really immense range of things. And finally, one of the things I'm really proudest of is our research park. You know, Moffett Field down here is a large part of Silicon Valley real estate, probably the largest undeveloped part other than what belongs to Stanford. And we have over 100 partners in our research park that have been selected primarily because they are either using a NASA technology or they're doing something related to NASA. And just to give you one example, this shows you sometimes cancellations of programs have unintended good consequences. But in the late 90s, there was a program to fly an airplane in the Martian atmosphere. It was canceled. The chief engineer on it had developed fuel cells, K.R. Sridhar. And so he got kind of perturbed, and he started this company, but he needed some place for it, so he started it at our research park. This company now has, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 employees, a multi-billion-dollar-a-year business. A perfect example of what we're doing to new forms of energy, new ways to help in the community. So I'm really proud of these efforts. I think they're really neat. It's just a couple new ones that we're working on with industry, and we have Space Act agreements. Using quantum computing. We have a major initiative in quantum computing. We have some industrial partners. We hope to have one of the world's first quantum computers at Ames to see how this can help not only NASA problems, but global problems. Another one is synthetic biology, the ability to actually program the genome. And I think this is key to us living in space, living on the moon, living on Mars or on asteroids. But it also has immense industrial potential. So we are partnering with people like the J. Craig Venter Institute, who you might have heard of. But it's really a fun area, and I think the future is unlimited for commercial activities.
Really cool. Ray, at Glenn, Glenn Research Center, Cleveland, Ohio, we usually think about it with, big factories, old industry, all that kind of stuff.
I haven't been to Cleveland lately.
I know, my parents still live there. It's not there anymore, the industry. So what are you doing? What are you doing to get into the 21st century here?
Okay, so just like Pete said, Glenn Research Center is predominantly a research center. We do both aeronautics and space work. So I became director 2 years ago, and I knew we were doing great research, but we weren't seeing a lot of research that was going from the lab and getting into either aeronautics programs or space programs or commercial products. And the reason being is because researchers like to do research, and they don't want to let go of their work. And so there's a lot of opportunities that I think are somewhat unrealized because of that. So we brought some people in to kind of take a look at all the research we're doing and kind of help us characterize the quality of the research we're doing and the readiness of the research we're doing and what potential partners we should be seeking out to commercialize some of these activities. So we've spent 2 years doing that, and I'm going to share with you. I always thought business development guys had an easy job, and I will tell you that it is not an easy job because you have to kiss a lot of babies and you got to shake a lot of hands, and most of the time nothing comes of it. But we're actually starting to get some traction at Glenn Research Center. And what we've been doing, we started out about a year ago. We did what we called an automotive technology showcase Well, we brought the automotive industry in the state of Ohio into Glenn Research Center, and we exposed them to the research we're doing and how it might apply to solve some real problems in automotive industry. Batteries, flywheels, advanced materials, all kinds of things. And from that, we developed about 90 potential leads that we've been working on over the last year. Similarly, what we did, in November, we did another showcase, but a broader showcase with our community, where we went out and showed them some of the work we're doing, and we've developed about 250 leads there. So we've got all these potential commercial partners, and now you got to you're in a place where you've got a lot of opportunities, and you've got to somewhat sort those opportunities for which ones of those opportunities potentially have the best benefit. So we've kind of parsed our list down, and we've got about 16 opportunities that we're pursuing. And I like Pete, the things we're doing to advance aeronautics and advance space exploration, but they have the ability to solve real problems here on Earth today. And so one of the areas that we're working with, there's a company in Ohio called Parker Aerospace. They're like one of the biggest suppliers to both Airbus and Boeing, and they want to incorporate fuel cells into aircraft as opposed to internal combustion engines. So they've developed a fuel cell and asked for our fuel cell experts to red team their design, and we found two significant problems with their design that they're now going back and making changes. And this has become such a big deal in Europe that the German government is actually worried about Parker taking a very strong position in this type of technology for aircraft, that they're building their own fuel cell capability in Germany. So I think my job as a research center director is to help U.S. companies stay ahead of the game, so to speak, particularly in aerospace, because it's the only industry in this country where we still have a significant positive balance of trade with the rest of the world. So we're working with companies like Parker, we're working with companies like Eaton, and Eaton is actually a Cleveland-based company. We've got a Space Act agreement and work with them. They're looking to use materials technologies and processes that we've developed, all about creating new products or improving the quality of their products so they can be more competitive in a global market. So I think my job is, number one, is to make sure I've got our people working on the right technologies to help advance space exploration and make aviation travel safer, consume less fuel, and obviously be more reliable. But then also on the space side, make sure that we're doing things that enable space travel beyond low Earth orbit, and at the same time try to find the opportunities to put these technologies out into the marketplace to create jobs and stimulate the economy. So our efforts, we have a new business board. We pretty much will work with anybody, provided we can show a direct alignment between the work we're doing and the NASA mission. We work on a fully reimbursable basis, so we're not in this for a free ride, so to speak. We've got test facilities, we've got tools, models that we've built, and we've got technologies, all of which we're willing to bring to the table and work with commercial entities if they've got, if they want to take these technologies and bring them into a commercial operation. So that's what we do. We do it a lot because I think it's important. And like I said, we've got a really good integration with our community. We have a group called the Greater Cleveland Partnership in Cleveland and Northeast Technical Organization that really looks at enabling the transfer of technology from federal labs into commercial application, and really about trying to create economic stimulation and hopefully make our country stronger from a strong economy basis as opposed to other ways. So that's what we're doing.
So Pete, some of you have touched on this already, but the big question is why? I mean, why pursue partnerships with commercial partners? Why not do things that NASA does well and have NASA only do them?
Well, I'll give you a couple answers. The first one is in the law.
Good answer.
That if you go back and read the Space Act of 1958, it says that and our predecessor agency had the same purpose, is that the taxpayers are paying us to do things in order to generate new industry and new jobs and new potential. So, you know, I'll just start by, and it's in current presidential policy. Every president, every Congress has endorsed that. But much more to the point that, let me use space exploration, which is our biggest single effort within NASA. We are not going to be able to do the magnificent things that we have to do without a robust commercial sector that gets most of its money from other customers. And so if we can succeed in midwiving that new industry, it will pay huge dividends. It will enable us to put people on Mars. It will enable us to settle the solar system. It'll enable us to find out the secrets of the universe. So it is not just a nice to have, it is critical because we can't afford to do the things that we need to do without it.
Mm-hmm. Ellen, why?
Well, I'll tell you, at JSC, we relooked at our mission when the shuttle landed for the last time last year, made sure we were looking forward. And our vision of JSC is that we lead human space exploration in a way that is affordable, sustainable, and benefits all humankind. So we cannot do that alone. The way we are going to be able to do that, to make it affordable and sustainable over many years, where we continue programs and are able to build on them, and where many people are able to benefit, is to bring in commercial partners, to make sure we make use of all NASA centers, to bring in international partners. And it's absolutely clear that's what we need to do. So that's why it's so important for us. And of course, our focus right now is, our mission is to make sure that we are getting the most out of ISS and to help enable the commercialization of low Earth orbit. And there are many partners out there who are interested in doing that, and that's why we're partnering with them.
Great. Bob?
Yeah, well, as Pete said, I believe we've been directed to enable commercial space, and I don't think anywhere else on Earth right now do we have the location, the facilities that are available, and the talented workforce that is available to make that happen. In the past, KSC has been very dependent on these large government programs, Apollo, Shuttle, Space Station, and we have these huge fluctuations as the programs come and go. And if we really need to survive in the future, we have to have a more diverse base. And I believe that's what we're doing. We've reorganized, so we have a very strong central engineering team. It's not resident in the program. We have a strong mission assurance team. We have the facilities and capabilities available to provide matrix support to a number of customers. And as you know, they said it's not free. We have reimbursable Space Act agreements. So our goal is to make it affordable. And there's a lot of things that we have to work through in all of this, and we can talk about that more later. But the bottom line is, it's critical to our future as a nation. We are a spacefaring nation, but we need to take it to the next step. We need to make it so that it's not just about a few people going to space on, you know, a large government program, but as aviation, you know, if you look back on aviation, and I kind of liken it, I use that as my analogy. When World War I ended and they had all these excess biplanes and stuff, you know, you'd go off in a Jenny at the county fair and you'd pay your $50 or whatever, and you'd go see the farm from 2,000 feet high. Well, that's, you know, Virgin Galactic and X-Corps. They're taking folks up on that flight to see the Earth from, you know, 50 miles high. The flights to low Earth orbit, you know, with Bigelow's facility, or going to the International Space Station on these commercial carriers, it's going to cost more. But that's the way aviation was. It was only for the very rich in the beginning. Everybody else took, you know, cars and boats and went places, and now we can all fly anywhere on Southwest Airlines. It's affordable for everybody, and someday that's what space travel is going to be. And we're at that beginning right now. We're at the very beginning. We're on that flat part of the curve before it goes exponential. and we're enabling that, we're making that happen. So I think, we're doing it for the future.
Great. Ray, you addressed this a little bit, but do you want to say anything else about the why?
I would say for me the why is, realistically, we've got things that the taxpayers have been paying for years that aren't seeing the light of day. And if that's not a good enough reason why, we need to get this technology out, because it really will change the way things work on Earth. And people talk about innovation. My sense is that once these technologies get out, they're gonna actually morph and evolve and change even beyond what we're doing in our labs. So we have a lady who's made thin film aerogel, and I don't know if people are familiar with what aerogel is, but the first ones I saw were like this kind of smoky gray, brittle glass type of material, and she now makes plastic film that's aerogel, and it insulates exactly, has the same insulation properties. And it's my thought we could probably start insulating homes with aerogel. We could create a replacement for Gore-Tex in high performance sports clothing. I think we could make a bladder out of aerogel and probably use it as a camelback, and people that are in very... So my point is, I think when these technologies get out in the marketplace, we're going to see these things just proliferate everywhere. It's going to create all kinds of economic opportunities. It's going to create jobs. It's going to just grow our business base. And then hopefully people will be paying more taxes, and they'll be finding a way to help NASA get more money so we can do more space exploration.
Be good.
So seriously, I mean, it's really somewhat of an economic model that we have. If we want to do the things we want to do, we got to grow our economy. We got to have a strong economy. These things have been paid for. We need to get them out into the commercial hands. So.
Great, thanks. Ellen, we have a tweeted question, and this one is, how long until private industry becomes stable enough to operate without government contracts? So that they don't have to rely on governments.
Is that a question for me, or should we have asked that earlier today?
I know, we probably should have asked the folks themselves, yeah.
I'm not going to guess on a number of years, but I will say when you look at the progress that has been made in commercial companies, and particularly in the areas I'm most familiar with, which is, of course, commercial cargo and crew. Look at the progress that's been made just in the last couple years. I mean, it's really been stunning. I think there's really, a momentum going now that it took a while to generate, and we were all trying to figure out how to do it. From NASA, we were trying to figure out how to do it, and the companies themselves, how do they participate, how do they move forward? And I think that momentum is going to continue to grow.
Great, Bob.
And along that line, talking about the momentum, I mean, the way this is going to work is through communication. We have to continue to communicate with one another. It's not an us and them thing. We're all in this together. And we have to share our ideas back and forth, but we have to listen. And we have to know, okay, what does the commercial industry need to be successful? And I think the partnerships they have with us, I mean, we have a lot to offer. And if we work together, we're going to do a whole lot more than we are on our own.
Great. Well, let me turn to another question here. And Pete, Ames has had a lot of experience with commercial partnerships. What do you see are the biggest challenges? What's been the hardest about establishing these partnerships?
Headquarters.
Say what you really feel, don't hold back.
Congress. The White House. No, I mean, somewhat jokingly, but we have a lot of bureaucracy for good reason. I might add that. I mean, it's there's we have with our NACA predecessors almost a century of history behind how we do aerospace, and there's a lot of regulations that the government does. There's a lot of laws, and those are not always very conducive to doing good commercial practices. And now, fortunately, NASA has an incredibly powerful tool called the Space Act Agreement, Now, my lawyers will kill me, but in essence, what a Space Act agreement says, if it's not prohibited by law, you can do it, which is a very powerful thing because most agencies of the government only can do things that are permitted by law. So this gives us a huge hole for lots of trucks to be driven through. And it's,
yes.
you know, and of course I think Ames has been a leader, and you know, well, it turns out there are now a set of rules at headquarters called the Warden Rules for a lot more reviews on Space Act agreements there used to be. But I think that, you know, Ames in particular, we're in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is in us. And a group of, you know, young folks in their garage that are doing a startup, you know, they do not want to hire a team of lawyers to handle all of this bureaucracy. So the challenge for us is to figure out ways to say yes if and not no because. And that's a hard thing to do. You know, it really is. And it's real easy if you're, you know, somebody that is in Washington, whether you're in Congress or the White House or in an organization. You look at the rules, it says no, because, and we need to get to that yes if.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're making progress. We have to be more efficient. We can't take as long as we do to get some of these agreements into place, and we're trying to figure out how to do that. But I think it's living within the guidelines, the rules and regulations that we have. I've got a facility. I have no requirement for it for our future exploration program. I do not have the funds to maintain it. I don't even have the funds to tear it down. But I would if I could, because it's a waste of money to just let it sit there and rot. But I got somebody else that can use that facility, and it enables commercial space. It brings jobs. It does all kinds of good things. You'd think I could just give it to them, but I can't. I got to live within the guidelines, and that facility has a current replacement value, and then there's a bunch of other stuff that goes in it, and pretty soon, you know, somebody's got to pay all kinds of money for something that I was going to tear down, and that just doesn't make sense. But we're figuring out how to work through all that, and we're going to get to the right answer. I truly believe if you're doing the right things for the right reasons, the right thing's going to happen, and we're going to get to the right reason. But we've got to be more efficient in the way that we do things, and cost effective, or it's not going to work.
And I was going to give an example because sometimes I think, you know, the lawyers and the procurement people get a bad rap, but they have, you know, stacks of regulations this thick that they're trying to make sure we don't violate. And they actually work out a lot of really ingenious agreements. You know, so I think the SpaceX people know this, but probably not a lot of people know, is when they did their demo mission, you know, they actually had some supplies on board that they transferred to NASA as part of that mission. Those supplies themselves could not be transferred under the demo mission because it's a Space Act agreement, and NASA's not allowed to get goods and services that benefit NASA through a Space Act agreement. That can only be done through a contract. Fortunately, we already had a commercial resupply services contract, so the actual transfer of those supplies had to be procured under that contract, even though the actual mission was part of a Space Act agreement mission. And so our folks figured out how to make those things happen within the regulations that we have to live with.
Ray, challenges.
Yeah, one final on that one. So we always vilify the lawyers and the procurement people. And what I found is a lot of times we run into the problem because we haven't brought them into the conversation early enough. And I find that if we sit down and we have the initial meetings with potential partners and we start talking about what we want to do together, they can already help steer us in the direction of areas that we shouldn't be doing, because one of the things, NASA should not be competing with other commercial entities, right? So we need to carefully balance that. But I found that when we bring our staff attorneys in to the conversation very early, we frame the agreements from the beginning, something that is gonna get through the system, and then the approval process seems to go a lot more efficient. So I would encourage any of you who may be thinking about dealing with NASA in a context of a Space Act agreement to make sure the NASA people bring their attorneys, because, oh, by the way, just because they're NASA attorneys doesn't mean they're going to try to do you in. they technically have to do the right thing even for the other side of the agreement. So you can somewhat trust that NASA is not going to take advantage of you, because at the end of the day, we want a good, productive, collaborative agreement that it is something that we build on, not just a one-off.
But I do think we're doing better at this.
Yeah, I do too.
And I think all the centers are working together. We're learning from each other, and our lawyers and procurement folks are talking to one another, and I think we're figuring out how to actually get this done, and it's going to improve. It's going to get better.
Thanks. Sorry, technical difficulty. Why don't we turn to some questions from our audience? There's a question over here.
Back in the 60s, we had two programs I contrast. One was Apollo, it's $24 billion, it was fantastically successful, and today it's a memory. The other was commercial satellites, which was maybe a couple $100 million, and today it's a $250 billion industry. So my question is to you is, what are the equivalent of ComSats today, and what fraction of NASA's resources are being spent to develop those?
Anyone? Pete?
Well, first of all, if I was smart enough to know that answer, I'd be a billionaire. But I'll take a crack at it anyhow. So probably if a government employee says, this is where you ought to invest your money, don't. But I think clearly one of those is people in space. We all grew up wanting to do what our colleagues did, and I think that's going to happen. And that is a very important business. We're seeing a lot of investment, from the Silicon Valley folks. A second one, which I'm increasingly intrigued with, and I think the space station is going to become a far more impressive laboratory than certainly I ever thought. I mean, there are others that thought it was, and that's biology. I mean, the technology of this century is biotech. We're seeing an explosion of biotech in Silicon Valley and throughout California, actually throughout the world. And interestingly enough, in space, we find that for reasons we do not understand, gene expression is fundamentally different. And that's going to tell us a lot about how life works and how you can make new products. So we're beginning to study that on the ISS, and I think that that's why we're interested in synthetic biology. I think that's going to be a major breakthrough area, is space biology, particularly fundamental biology.
I guess what I would say is I think NASA's role is not necessarily to figure out what that next industry is, it's to develop the capabilities so that those industries will develop. Because I think if there hadn't been Apollo, you wouldn't have had the commercial satellite industry, because that's the program that poured so much money into developing all the capability to be getting into space, understanding what that meant, that now there were industries that could come in and take advantage of that. And that's why I think it's so important now that we are turning our attention to beyond Earth orbit, beyond low Earth orbit, and making sure we're moving out the frontier. That's why we want to keep going, because 25 years from now or whatever it is, there will be other markets that will be beyond low Earth orbit, but it's because of the work that we're doing today and in the next decade of what it takes to get out there and to learn what it is we can do out there, how we can operate.
I'm sure all you know this. You talk about Apollo, 4.5% of the national budget. I mean, 10 times what we have now, less than 0.5% now. If we had 180 billion instead of 18 for the agency, think what we could do, not just in our exploration program, but in all the other areas that we're doing science and research. But that was a unique time in our history, and we have to figure out how to take what we have. We still have a lot of money when you compare it to other space agencies around the world, and we've got to make sure that we're investing it properly for the future to do the right thing.
Thanks. Another question. Let's see, there's a question way in the back.
Thank you. There was some talk a few years ago about Google indexing all of NASA's archives, both the written and the images, videos, everything like that. But I have a terribly difficult time. I have a more difficult time today finding NASA archives than I did just 5 years ago. Why?
I'm going to say I'm not an expert on that. I don't know if anybody up here is either.
Google has done some of that, but that's a pretty big job, and they've committed to a much broader digitization of of whole libraries. So that it's proceeding, but it's proceeding, you know, along with a lot of other things. We're also finding that, you know, this is again a legal issue, that as they digitize things and make them available, there's all sorts of copyright laws, even with government documents and so forth. So they're working through it, but it's going to happen. It is happening. There's a lot of documents that are now available online, either through Google or other sources. They're not very user-friendly. A hint, sounds like a business opportunity to me.
Great. We have a tweeted question. So let's see. I have a lot of them. One for Ellen. What is Johnson's plan going forward if commercial crew succeeds and NASA astronauts take flights from SpaceX or Boeing or Sierra Nevada or whomever? How is that different from the past? What does that mean for JSC?
Again, what we want to do is make sure we're continuing to move out and not just staying in low Earth orbit. So really, a commercial crew transportation system, it's not so much that it's a different strategy for JSC, it's a way that we're getting folks to and from orbit, but it doesn't change the fact that we want to continue to understand what it takes to live and operate and explore beyond low Earth orbit. So I think we have a pretty clear idea if what we want to do in the next few years. We want to make sure we're utilizing station to the greatest extent possible, and that includes science experiments that are really very fundamental, like the alpha magnetospectrometer. It includes experiments that are sponsored by a variety of companies and universities that look at direct payback to Earth, like some of the work they're doing on the salmonella bacteria in the vaccine. And it's also a place for us to test out technology that we'll use on exploration. So I really consider the International Space Station part of our exploration program. We're testing out advanced life support systems, testing out humanoid robots, a great way to do that where we can have access to that. And then, of course, you all know we're developing the Orion multipurpose crew vehicle. Marshall's focusing on the Space Launch System. Those are two, absolutely required capabilities to get beyond Earth orbit. Not the only ones required, but absolutely necessary for that. And if we have a thriving commercial crew transportation system, and hopefully more than one company that can provide it, that's good for NASA, provides competition, will help keep prices down, and that allows us to spend more money in moving that frontier out.
Not only is having two good for competition, but it's good for redundancy when you have issues to be able to have more than one way to get somewhere. Ellen mentioned ISS as an engineering test bed. I think, when you look at the international model that we have for ISS, when we do end up going exploring beyond our home planet, the relationships, the partnerships that we have set up, I think they're critical. It's a great model for when we finally do go exploring. But as an engineering test bed, humans, they're tough creatures to keep alive in space for long periods of time. When you look at a current Martian mission with today's propulsion technology, you're talking a year and a half. And to give somebody all the oxygen and water they need and air to breathe, food, and take care of all their waste and stuff, you got to have some pretty darn reliable systems. And right now, I don't think we got any systems that would last a year and a half without significant staging of spare parts and time to repair and everything else. So the space station makes a phenomenal engineering test bed for proving those systems that we need to actually explore beyond our home planet also.
Great, thanks. Another question from the audience, lady in green.
Oh, hi. I just recently saw the video clip of the ISS from the ESA. It's like a flyby, and it looks really impressive, but it gives me the impression that it looks like a flying junkyard. And I just wonder, if in the future, or if anybody has a plan to coordinate when we are doing any big program like that to kind of cut down on all these extraneous features. It just seems like everybody just build their own thing and they just slap it together.
Well, I guess maybe it's in the eye of the beholder, because what I see up there is an absolutely amazing spacecraft and laboratory. And a lot of the different pieces that you see all play a role. You know, we can dock up to, I think, 4 different spacecraft at once. So we can get, you know, a supply ship from Russia or from Japan. In fact, there's one docking tomorrow, I think, Friday. And we can, you know, send crew up right now through Soyuz, and in the future through a variety of other vehicles. Some of what you see on the outside are actually payloads. Some of them are Earth sensing payloads. One of them, as I mentioned, was the alpha magnetospectrometer, which is a very fundamental astrophysics experiment. So to me, I guess I see something that's extremely capable and very flexible. And we've been able to incorporate, you know, 5 space agencies from around the world in 15 countries. And within the laboratories that we have, we're incorporating a number of different companies and universities. To me, that's exactly what the International Space Station was built to do.
I absolutely agree that it's very, very impressive, but I'm just saying, can we do it better?
Well, I was
Cheaper?
going to say, I think from my knothole, because I was involved in some of this back in '94, we built a space station for functionality and for cost. And we really didn't think about the aesthetics, let's say. I mean, it was built, we needed to generate a certain amount of power, we needed to reject a certain amount of heat, we needed a certain amount of living space. And so I don't think we hired Frank Lloyd Wright to give us, I'm not trying
I
to
mean,
be-
there's a lot of thought that went into it.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal engineering complex.
But
And
it wasn't designed to be architecturally.
I'm not
You know-
saying about aesthetic. I'm just saying, like, it seems to be, it's extremely well functioned, but it seems like it's designed piecemeal. One person designed it.
No, it was not piecemeal. It was a very concentrated effort to put the right pieces in the right place to make it work, and complicated by having you know, a laboratory from Japan, Europe, Russia, and so on, and using some existing hardware modified to go up there. So no, a lot of thought went into it. Yeah, I still would like to see that, you know, that Flash Gordon rocket ship that's nice and sleek and takes off and goes to Mars and comes back and lands vertically. Maybe someday, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. Question here, the gentleman standing. Oh, he has the mic. I was asking the mic guy for a question. A question over here?
Hi, Alan Kreider. I'd like to find out what the individual centers are doing to support commercial training, and some of the knowledge base that you have through NASA. How is that going to be distributed or taught in the future?
Well, let me start. I mean, there's a lot of different levels of training, but I think that you also have to separate training from education. And I think our job as a government agency is to be more involved in the education side than it is the training side. And to do that, we're involved at every level. There are, for example, at Ames, there are almost 1,000 students, all the way from postdoc researchers down to high school students. Every center does this. It is an important part of our program, but maybe even more to the point, much of the work done at NASA centers and with NASA involves universities. And this is one of our primary functions, is to provide a educational opportunity for science, math, other technical, you know, STEM skills, and probably more to the point, it's an inspiration. So I think that we do very well on that. You know, we can always do more. Unfortunately, our education budget is very small, but every science program, every engineering program, and even a lot of the support programs emphasize education of the next generation of experts that are going to take us throughout the solar system, and as Bob said, make science fiction real.
I have a tweeted question, and this is a workforce question. So how do you deal with the conflict between those who have been in the civil service for a long, long, long time and trying to bring in new employees when there isn't a lot of room to bring in those new employees?
Oh, but there is. And we have, as Pete mentioned, a superb co-op program. And we've made a commitment to all our co-ops that that do well, first off, graduate. And to get into a NASA co-op program, you got to be doing pretty good, okay? We get the best. And we're hiring all of them at KSC. We've made that commitment. And we're bringing down the age of our average age of our workforce. It's around 42, 43 right now at KSC, and we're coming down, okay? And the new employees that come on board, they want to be part of the space program. They realize that, this is the future, this is exciting, this is a great place to work, and it's fun. And those that have been around for a while learn a lot from our co-ops. The kids graduating from college today, they've got skills that it's amazing, the tools that they bring, their programming capabilities, just the way they look at things, and we want that at NASA. We want that new look, that different way of coming to the answer on a problem. And diversity, it's diversity of thought. It's not just man, woman, black, white, Hispanic, young, old. It's getting everybody together, and we all bring different experiences to the table. And when you have that diversity, you're going to get to the best answer. So, yeah, we're making every effort we can to hire every young person fresh out possible.
I think it is probably fair to say, though, that overall we're not doing a lot of hiring. In fact, almost all the centers are coming down. We've come down considerably in the contractor workforce, which is that's how NASA operates. We grow and shrink primarily through our contractor workforce, but definitely our civil servant numbers have come down. We've come down about 7% at JSC in the last 2 years. However, as Bob said, the same thing is true at JSC. What hiring we are able to do, we are giving first priority to our co-op students because we want to make sure we don't just turn into an aging workforce. And then the other thing that we're doing, not exactly consciously, but we are apparently seeding all the commercial crew companies. When Mike Coates and I went out to SpaceX last summer to visit, the two folks that took us around were ex-JSC folks. Then we went over to Colorado and visited SpaceX, and there were 6 SpaceX folks in the room, and 5 of them were ex-JSC folks. So as much as we hate to lose those talented people, the silver lining is that they're part of the new look in commercial aerospace.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, I didn't want to give you the impression that we're just hiring, because we're not. From a civil service point of view, the number of civil servants at KSC is coming down. What our commitment is those that we do hire are the younger folks, and then those middle-level skills that we have to actually have to maintain our capabilities.
Yeah, I'm interested. Bob said the average age at KSC was 42. At my center, it's 52. So maybe we should. But frankly, even though we are coming down, we're getting older, and we're going to retire or die, and so there'll be jobs available.
Speak for yourself, Pete.
Well, I may live forever, but that's it. But I really want to underscore Ellen's point here that that working in the space industry, is not just NASA.
Right.
It is at universities, it's our partners, it's particularly these new commercial companies. And it's not just space companies. I've lost at least 100 civil servants in the last 8 years to that little startup next to me, I think Giggle or Google or something that you probably heard of them.
Yeah, I don't know
And,
them.
they make a lot of money. And the interesting thing is after they work there a while and they can afford a house or a Porsche, then they come back and work for us again. So, it's sort of the new thing in that, it used to be you got a job somewhere and you stayed there for your entire career. Now it's you work for a few years at place A, place B, place C. So I think that what we're going to see is a lot of people will work at a NASA center. They may be a student. They may work for a contractor. They may be a civil servant for a while. and then they're going to work in industry, and then they're going to work in academia, so that you're going to have a very full and even more exciting career, but you're going to move around. So, and that's a good thing.
Another question from the audience here in the front.
Assuming Stratolauncher is a success, would you think that the cost of the current crew and cargo concepts, commercial concepts, would be affordable if Stratolauncher is a success?
First off, I'm not, I would not want to predict what their business model is or how it's going to work out for them, but we are working to help, we're in negotiations for Stratolaunch to fly out of the Cape if we can get there, and we got to see how they develop and how they go along, whether they pull everything together. Obviously, if you have, the real cost is, and it was mentioned in an earlier panel, it's the reusability. It's anything time that you can gain reusability and lower the cost to orbit, that makes it more successful. So we'll have to see how it works out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Another question. Question over here.
Hi guys, I'm personally a product of the educational program at NASA, so I'm very appreciative. My question for you is if you could each give an example of a better, faster, cheaper mission or program at each of your centers.
I'll start. Certainly over the last few years, one of the trends at Johnson Space Center has been to kind of step up what we do in technology development. And we want to make sure that we are giving our engineers some hands-on activities and some things that they can actually go from a concept to at least some sort of ground test or some sort of test that they can actually see to completion that they're really sort of doing on their own. And so one of the projects I'll talk a little bit about is called Morpheus. And this was actually started with a partnership with Armadillo Aerospace. In terms of developing a LOX methane engine, which could be used for in-space propulsion and for landing on another surface. So we have a vertical test bed, again, sort of grew out of this partnership with Armadillo, and we've taken it further. And we're also integrating another project that we work on that's automated landing and hazard avoidance, and kind of put those sensors. We work on that with Langley Research Center, and I'm sure there's other centers involved also. So we're integrating that. We've done some testing at Johnson Space Center where we've actually seen the lander go up and hover and be able to come back down. And just this week, we're sending all the equipment out to Kennedy Space Center. They've built a little sort of boulder debris field out there, and we're going to be testing Morpheus with support from KSC out there. And what this really is it's not just about the technology, but it's about a rapid prototyping environment where you build something, you test it, you tweak it, you change it a little bit, build it, test it, and be able to really see progress over a short amount of time and be developing a technology that we hope to use in the future in exploration.
Yeah, George is one of our students. First of all, you got that wrong. It's not faster, better, cheaper. Dan Golden goofed that up. It's faster, cheaper, better, and better. I know because I wrote that in the speech for the Vice President Quayle before Golden stole it and goofed it up. And the idea...
That's a story.
The idea is that when I say faster and cheaper is that the reason it's better isn't because it's cheaper or faster. It's the combination of it, which means you can iterate a lot more quickly. So when you do research or technology or science or operations, if you can make a cycle a lot quicker, that is always better. If you look here in Silicon Valley, if you can go through a generation of new electronics or new capability or new products, that is better. So, I think it's important because there's a lot of emotion about faster, better, cheaper, but if you look at what the original intent was. Now, I will tell you that, in my opinion, everything we do at Ames faster, cheaper, and better. But just to give you an example of an exciting thing, I know that all the centers have some really cool stuff, is our PhoneSat project, which it plans to do that. I mean, a few years ago, my head of engineering used to hold these things up and say, this has all the functions of a satellite. Now, in fact, he was wrong. It has a lot more functions. It's got more computing power than anything we put in space. And so we have a program to use these as CubeSats, and so that every few months you can put one up and iterate it. Now, we don't use these goofy iPhones because they've got proprietary software. It turns out, again, the small company next to us gave us a whole basket full of Google Droids, and which are open source software, which, by the way, is very important. So, because it means now you can iterate on it very quickly by getting into the software and doing it. So, again, I mean, I think every center I've seen this kind of cool stuff, but the critical thing here is not the price, it's the ability to iterate the process really quickly, and the station is going to give us the ability to do that with research. So that's the thing we're really aiming at.
And it depends on what you're going to do. There are some programs they just don't lend themselves. An exploration program that develops a heavy lift rocket and crew capability that can evolve to take us to an asteroid, the moon, Mars, or wherever is not something that you're going to do, faster, cheaper, better. It's going to be done in a very methodical way to deliver the right product. But what Ellen said is we're working on a lot of small engineering products to get experience for our younger new engineers. At KSC, we just developed a capability to mine the moon, a payload that we put on a Canadian rover that we sent out to Hawaii, and we controlled it from the Launch Control Center in Florida at KSC, operating this rover in Hawaii as if it were on the moon. And this will have the capability to mine the moon. It's going to fly down the road, and I think that thing was done in a year and a half, less than 2 years. It's pretty amazing what you can do when you give the team direction and the resources, and then turn them loose to go do it. They're going to get it done.
A last tweeted question here. Are any NASA centers actually exploring for new commercial markets, or are they just waiting for companies to come to them?
I would tell you we're out exploring. We're talking to people that we never would have thought of talking to. A company called Power Through that makes uninterruptible power sources. So we're really out looking for people who want to do, commercialize our technology. So we actually spend a lot of time, the best sources for finding these kind of organizations is to work with community organizations that either enable, startup companies or technology transfer. So we work with those. We work with other national labs to work with small SBIRs to commercialize our technology. So we're out actively pursuing a number of things. We're working with a venture capitalist on a flywheel project. First time I've ever done that. I would tell you it's an interesting thing. So no, we're actually out looking for people to work with, and non-traditional partners. It's not just people who fly things into space. It's people who build things, people who manufacture things, people who create commercial products that they put on the market. So.
And I would say the same thing. We're definitely not just sitting back waiting for people to come to us. We do have a strategic opportunities and partnerships development office. And in fact, there's at least one person here from that office from JSC who helps us look and understand who good partners might be. And just as Ray said, we've found some really interesting partnerships beyond the aerospace community. Some of you may know about our Robonaut 2 humanoid robonaut that we've put up on the International Space Station. We're trying to understand how we can have a robot work next to a human and take over a lot of the more routine, mundane tasks. That was developed with a partnership with General Motors, not somebody we had traditionally partnered with. But they had an interest also in the same type of technology, obviously a different end purpose. They would like robots working next to humans in their factories who can use the same type of tools, help prevent carpal tunnel syndrome or other repetitive motion injuries, whereas we wanted to use it in space. But the combination of us allowed us to make a lot more progress in a shorter amount of time than we could have on our own with just NASA resources.
KSC is not a research center. We see our primary role as the processing, launch, and recovery of spacecraft. So the work that we look for has to tie into that in order to be compatible with what we do. And so going out and seeking that, it pretty much seeks us. But we do have an enhanced use lease agreement with the state of Florida where we have given them land adjacent to KSC. We've taken on KSC property but outside the fence, and we've taken the Space Life Sciences Lab that was built by the state of Florida for KSC use in 2004. We've moved that outside the fence adjacent to this property, and it has become the anchor tenant for Exploration Park, which is an R&D park that the state of Florida is actively seeking the right technical team to come in and have operate from their different businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's, of course, Ames always has to be a little different. We seek partners everywhere. In fact, we have a rather innovative partnership on education and CubeSats involving an institution you might have heard of up the road, San Quentin. It's a very interesting one, and it's very successful. The people that we deal with are,
they're there.
They're there, so they tend to work with us. And I think these partnerships are really everywhere. We do a lot of international partnerships. We've just started one with Lithuania, not what you consider a traditional space power. And we have found technologies and capabilities in Lithuania that could revolutionize some of our CubeSat abilities. So I think across NASA I'm seeing this, to find new innovative partnerships with people that you didn't think could, that might have something to offer. And you find when you sit down with them, there's incredible capabilities, all the way from Lithuania to San Quentin.
One last question from the audience. Question down here, front.
Oh, thanks. What do you think, what would you do to make things better? What is NASA doing wrong? And if you were, say, the administrator, or if you could, run all the centers for 1 year, what would you do in this big picture to make things better involving the big picture commercialization?
I'll let my colleague, Dr. Warden, answer that one.
I'll give you an answer to that.
Yes, the question was, what can you do to make things better, especially with the commercial world?
Since Creon Levitt is one of our mad scientists, I would put him in charge.
And we let Pete answer the question because he's expendable.
And I'll just say...
By the way, you come and see me afterwards about a revision to your salary.
The fact that we're all here, I think one of our messages is to you, we're listening. We want to understand what you need and how we can help support you better. And I think by doing that, actually, NASA will improve our ability to support commercial space.
Are you saying you think NASA could listen better? That's what you improve, is how well we listen?
No, I think we listen, but I think, the key is you got to tell us. We're listening. You got to tell us what you need to be successful. We will listen. And as I said earlier, this is a partnership. We're in this together. We have to be successful. It's critical to the future of our country. We want to be successful, okay? And we want to work together with you. So tell us what you need. Tell us what we're not doing right. Tell us where we can do better. And allow us to share our expertise with you also.
All right. Thank you. Thank our panelists very much. Thank you for your great questions. Aren't we downsizing?
We're all about moving exploration forward, and I think actually that's what everybody in this room is about. And at JSC, we have the International Space Station program, and we're able to now really focus on utilizing the station. But part of our job is making sure we can continue to utilize that. We have got to be able to get cargo and crew up and back. And the people in this room are prime players in that.
Thanks, Bob.
You know, I was up at Tallahassee talking to someone up there, and they said, geez, it's really a shame that the Kennedy Space Center is closing, and, you know, the
Somebody
space
asked me that at the
program's
sushi
over.
bar
And I
last
said,
night.
they had to screw me out of the ceiling as I educated him.
Yeah.
But, you know, first off, this whole thing, you know, NASA's exploration program, commercial space, big rockets, and commercial and all that stuff, they're not mutually exclusive. They're very compatible, and we need them both, and we need to work together. And I've been coming to the conference here for a couple of years now, and, you know, I love getting out and talking and saying how important it is that we work together to make this a reality. Our space program, nothing could be further from the truth. We have been so busy at the Kennedy Space Center this last year. It was a year ago this month that we flew Atlantis on its last flight. And the next day, 2,200 people walked out the door, and that was difficult. But when I look at the progress we have made on the infrastructure, preparing for the future, and you know the whole 21st century launch complex idea, you know the money that we're spending on the heavy lift rocket, the modifications that we're making support commercial space also. We've been very proactive in how we design what we're doing so that it's not specific to any one vehicle. The 21st century launch complex line, you know, it's being used to support the heavy rocket, but it also is making modifications to the range and making it more efficient and helping in that regard too. So I think that we're working together extremely well in those areas, and you know, the clean pad concept, the ideas that we have in place to bring commercial companies and a large government exploration program working together from the same launch complex. I mean, this is the future. One day, my vision for KSC is that, you know, one day it's like going to a true spaceport. We got commercial crew and cargo taken off. We got government missions taken off. We got, you know, tourists going up on suborbital flights for a little jaunt into space to see the Earth from 50 miles high. And, you know, we're making that happen, and we've made huge progress.
Great. Pete, at Ames. Ames is renowned for its innovative approaches to flight engineer on STS-96 in 1999 and STS-110 in 2002. She received a BS in physics from San Diego State University and an MS and a doctorate in electrical engineering from Stanford. And she's a classical flutist and a private pilot. And Ray Lugo. No, sorry. Let me go to Pete. Pete's sitting there. Pete Warden. Pete is director of Ames right here in Mountain View, California. And he's transformed the Ames Research Center over his tour of 3 years. He's taken a leadership role in cost-effective small satellite missions. And prior to becoming Ames Center director, Pete was a research professor of astronomy, optical sciences, and planetary sciences at the University of Arizona. Additionally, he previously served as a consultant to DARPA on space-related issues. In 2004, he served as congressional fellow and chief advisor to the chairman of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Science and Space. He retired in 2004 after serving 29 years in the U.S. Air Force. And Ray. Ray Lugo is director of the Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. He's been director since 2010, and he served as deputy director from 2007 to 2010. Prior to his positions at Glenn, he served as deputy program manager of the Launch Services Program at Kennedy Space Center. He began his NASA career in 1975 as a co-op, and his first assignment was as an engineer responsible for construction modifications to Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center in preparation for the first shuttle launch. He earned a BS in engineering from the University of Central Florida and a master's in engineering management from Florida Institute of Technology. Now on to our questions. So, can we please start with Bob? And can you describe your center's current efforts to engage and support commercial companies?
Well, I think they're quite extensive, Rebecca. I mean, first off, we established a Center Planning and Development Office to be our interface, our front door to KSC for commercial ventures. With the transition from the shuttle, And I look back over on the last year, how much we've accomplished, but we had a lot of excess capacity. And we truly want to make KSC this multi-user spaceport of the future. And so how could we utilize this capacity that we don't have to help enable commercial space? And I feel we have been given a mandate from the administration and from Charlie to enable commercial space operations. So how do we do that? And it's through partnerships and making available what we have at KSC to commercial companies. So a lot of it has been done through the state of Florida, Space Florida. I think one of our premier agreements from an optical point of view is that we took Orbiter Processing Facility 3 in the shuttle main engine shop, and through a use agreement with the state of Florida, we've turned it over to Space Florida. And they, in turn, are bringing Boeing and the CST-100 spacecraft in there, should Boeing continue to win on the Commercial Crew Space Acts. We've also worked another capability, the NSLD. It's a logistics rework facility that was off-site at KSC. And we've signed a Space Act agreement to allow a company to maintain over 1,600 pieces of NASA equipment and keep them available for us and the people that operate them for, we don't have a need for it all right now, but we are going to have a need for it in the future. How do we maintain that, keep it up, and be able to utilize it when we do have this capability and this critical skill? And Craig Technologies is going to be operating the NSLD and keep that equipment available for us in the future. I think when I look at, what is a multi-user spaceport of the future, it's got horizontal launch and landing capability, vertical processing, and so on. And we're working on a number of agreements for companies to move in and operate from the shuttle landing facility. A lot of this is still, in the negotiation stage, and it depends on how things work out in the commercial industry. But the key here is that we want to make KSC that commercial spaceport of the future. We want science fiction to become reality, and I think we're making a huge step in that direction, and we've made tremendous progress over the last year, Rebecca.
Great. Ellen, how about you? What are you doing at Johnson Space Center?
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here today. We have a lot to talk about in terms of the work we do at Johnson Space Center with commercial companies. There's really two primary ways that we work with commercial companies. One of them is through the actual programs that NASA has set up. So initially starting with the COTS program, which was headquartered at JSC. And so the vast majority of the people that supported that and worked with those companies were JSC folks. And that extends all.
Hello. I hope you guys enjoyed lunch. Now I'd like to begin with the afternoon portion of the conference. By popular demand, we are happy to bring back the NASA Leadership Roundtable. NASA centers provide different services and offer unique technical expertise to commercial companies. Some have innovation centers that host companies and act as incubators. How are these relationships working, and can we improve them? We invite the leaders of these centers to discuss their experiences and perspectives. The moderator of this panel is Dr. Rebecca Spike-Kaiser, who is currently NASA's Associate Deputy Administrator for Strategy and Policy, and she will introduce our distinguished guests. Please welcome Dr. Rebecca Spike-Kaiser.
Thank you all. And if you didn't see this panel last year, you're in for a treat. These folks are NASA leaders for a reason. And not only are they engaging and enthusiastic about what they do, but what you'll see is how well they work closely together. And that'll really come through. So let me say first off that we encourage you to tweet your questions. And please do. And I'm going to intersperse my questions to the panel with yours. So that's your job. Be engaged. Ask lots and lots of questions. And if you don't have the tweeting capability, I will leave some time at the end for actual questions from human beings raising their hands the old style way. So let me introduce our panelists. We have Bob Cabana. And Bob has been director of the Kennedy Space Center in Florida since October 2008. Prior to that, he was director of the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. And before Stennis, he served as deputy director of Johnson Space Center in Texas. Bob graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy with a BS in math and was an officer in the U.S. Marine Corps. He has flown on 4 shuttle missions, serving as pilot of Discovery in October of 1990 and December of 1992, commander of Columbia in July of 94, and commander of Endeavour in December 98 on the first space station assembly mission. Next, we have Ellen Ochoa. And Ellen is deputy director of Johnson Space Center, and she's been deputy since 2007. She became an astronaut in 1991 and is a veteran of 4 space flights as well. She was a mission specialist on STS-56 in 1993, payload commander on STS-66 in 94, and mission specialist in
the way through the successful flight that we had earlier on SpaceX, where we had people working all through the mission as well in mission control, and really a masterful job by Holly Ridings in mission control to work with both the NASA and the SpaceX team to carry that out. We of course have the ISS program, and they are the customer for commercial cargo now, and we're starting up the commercial resupply services contract in a big way now. And of course, they're the eventual customer for commercial crew. And then in the latest program, the commercial crew program, hosted by KSC, JSC is a major partner of that, and so we have talented folks at both of our centers that support that and that work very closely on our partner integration teams with all of those folks. The other major way we work with companies is similar to what Bob was talking about, where individual companies come to us and say, you have some expertise at your center that we'd like to take advantage of, that we'd like to use. You have some kind of testing capability, analysis capability, and that fits in well with a need that we have that we don't need to necessarily grow in our company right now. And we'd like to take advantage of that. So we have separate Space Act agreements outside of the program to work with all of the companies that are involved in CC Dev, as well as a lot of other companies. Some of them are essentially kind of just an overall technical services for spacecraft systems because we have so much experience in developing and operating spacecraft systems. So we might be able to help out in advanced life support, GNNC, lots of different areas. We do some testing. We've done recently some thruster testing for Boeing on their CST-100 thrusters. We've done heat shield ablator testing. And even long before commercial crew, we've had a Space Act agreement with Bigelow Aerospace for a number of years. As you know, they license the inflatable technology from us, and we continue to work with them on that. We work with Scaled Composites to do testing now and analysis on their nitrous oxide. So there are a lot of things that we do at Johnson Space Center in which various different companies have an interest in.
Great. Ellen, let's get this question out of the way for you and Bob. Is human spaceflight dead?
Let's see. I know several people that are flying in space right now, so I certainly hope not.
Is NASA going out of business?